I had been with the company for over 5 years, pouring my heart and soul into my work. I wasn't just an employee, I was a key part of the team, building relationships and making things happen. But one day, out of nowhere, my CEO, Thomas, told me his son was replacing me. No warning, no explanation, just a cold, shocking decision. And that wasn't the worst part. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew about him. Thomas, the man I had trusted, had been living a double life. Hidden away was a secret family, and he had used his power to keep it all buried. How could a person I respected for so long have been hiding something so huge? I had been working at the company for a little over 5 years. When I first joined, it felt like stepping into a place where I could really grow. I wasn't just clocking in and out, I gave it my all. I stayed late when needed, helped out even when something wasn't technically my job. And over time, I built genuine relationships with both clients and coworkers. It felt good to be needed. I wasn't there just for the paycheck. I believed in what we were building. I believed in the team. And more importantly, I believed in the leadership. Thomas, the CEO, played a big role in why I felt that way. He wasn't just some distant corporate figure who stayed locked in his office. He actually made time for people. He'd pass by your desk and ask how your weekend went, or drop a joke during a meeting that lightened the mood. It always felt like he was trying to make the workplace more human, and that mattered. He used to talk to me a lot, sometimes even about personal stuff, like his kids or his wife's obsession with gardening. We shared stories, laughed during coffee breaks, and more than once, he told me how much he appreciated the work I was doing. He called me dependable. He called me part of the inner circle. He also often spoke about the company like it was his life's mission. "This is more than a business," he once said. "It's a legacy." And I believed him. He talked about his vision for growth, about wanting to expand into new markets, and how important it was to keep the company values intact while scaling. I felt proud to be a part of that journey. He treated me like someone who might be there for the long haul, maybe even someone who would grow into a bigger leadership role. At least that's what I thought. That's why what happened next knocked the wind out of me. It was a regular Thursday. I remember it clearly because we had just wrapped up a major project with a client that had been dragging on for months. Everyone was in high spirits, and I was finally starting to relax a bit. Thomas called me into his office around 4 p.m. I thought he was going to congratulate me, maybe even talk about new responsibilities. But as soon as I sat down, I could tell something was off. He didn't smile, no jokes, just this serious look I hadn't seen before. Then he said it. "My son is going to be stepping into your role." Just like that. No build-up, no context. I honestly thought I had misheard him. "Wait, what?" I asked, thinking maybe there was some mistake or miscommunication. He didn't offer much of an explanation, just said it was a decision he had made and that it was time for change. I kept waiting for more, some background, a reason, anything, but it didn't come. I asked him what I did wrong, if this was performance-related, but he shook his head. "This isn't about performance, you've been great." That was somehow even worse. If I had messed up, at least I'd have something to work with. But to be told I was doing great, only to be replaced anyway? That made no sense. I had never even met his son. Not once in all these years had he mentioned grooming him to take over or hinted that he was coming on board. There was never any talk about transitioning or me training someone new. It was like he just pulled the rug out from under me, and everything I had built, everything I had given, didn't matter anymore. What stung the most was how personal it felt. This wasn't just about losing a job or a position. It felt like betrayal. I had trusted him. I had gone above and beyond for this company. I had sacrificed personal time, holidays, weekends, thinking I was investing in something meaningful, thinking my loyalty would count for something. But in the end, it didn't. I was replaced just like that. And not by someone more qualified, not by someone who had been in the trenches with us, but by his son, a person I'd never seen once in all my time there. No introduction, no interview, no team meeting to discuss changes, just a cold, sudden switch. After the meeting, I walked out of his office numb. I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, confusion. All I knew was that something had shifted permanently. I could still hear people laughing in the break room, still see emails piling up in my inbox. But for me, time had kind of frozen. Everything I thought I knew about my place in the company and about Thomas was turned upside down in a matter of minutes. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Thomas was under pressure. Maybe it was just one of those cold business decisions that people at the top sometimes have to make. I told myself not to take it personally. After all, companies restructure all the time. But even as I tried to stay calm and professional, something didn't sit right. This wasn't just a reshuffle or a promotion that I had missed. This was someone being brought in completely out of the blue to take over everything I had built. And that someone just happened to be Thomas's son? A son none of us had ever even heard about? That didn't make sense. The more I thought about it, the more strange it felt. I had known Thomas for over 5 years. We had shared personal stories. I'd heard about his wife, his daughters, and his vacation photos from their family trips. Not once, not a single time, did he ever mention having a son, especially not one old enough or qualified enough to step into a senior role at the company. It started to bug me, so like anyone else would, I started asking questions, quietly, carefully. Not to stir drama, but just to understand what was really going on. And then something happened that changed everything. I was going through some old files on our shared drive, trying to organize things for a project handover, and stumbled upon a photo in a folder that looked like it didn't belong there. It wasn't labeled, just a random image file buried deep. Out of curiosity, I clicked on it, and there it was. Thomas, standing next to a woman I had never seen before, smiling with his arm around her. In front of them was a teenage boy. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That was his son, the same one who had just taken over my position. I must have stared at that photo for a solid minute. My mind was racing. This wasn't just a new hire anymore. This wasn't even just garden variety nepotism. This was a secret, a full-on years-long secret that Thomas had hidden from everyone. The woman in the photo wasn't the wife he had talked about. The boy wasn't a child from the family we all knew. This was someone else entirely, a second family. I can't explain the feeling that came over me. It wasn't just shock, it was betrayal on a level I wasn't prepared for. This man had been my mentor. He'd made me feel like I was part of something real, something close-knit. I'd confided in him, celebrated milestones with him. I genuinely looked up to him, and now I was looking at proof that he had been living a completely different life, right under our noses. I kept thinking about all the times he had talked about loyalty, about trust, about transparency and leadership, all those company speeches about being one team, one family. And now I knew he had been hiding an entire family the whole time, not just from me, but from everyone at the company. It was hard to process. Suddenly, every moment of respect I had felt for him felt tainted. Every casual chat we'd had in the hallway, every kind word he'd said, every compliment. None of it felt real anymore. I started connecting the dots. His son hadn't earned this role. He hadn't worked his way up. He had been parachuted in, not because of his skills, but because Thomas had made a promise to someone on the side. Maybe to protect his second family's future. Maybe out of guilt, who knows? But what I did know was that I had been pushed aside for someone I didn't even know existed, someone Thomas had kept hidden for reasons only he truly understood. It hurt, not just the professional side of things, but the personal side too. Because when you give years of your life to a job, to a leader you believe in, you expect a certain level of honesty in return. You don't expect to find out that you were never really in the full picture, that decisions were being made behind closed doors for reasons that had nothing to do with merit, performance, or potential. I started to see the company differently after that. Things I had once been proud of started to feel hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling of being used, of being a placeholder, until the real heir was ready. And worse than that, I felt complicit. I had been part of a system that praised transparency and trust, while its own leader was living a lie. After everything that happened, I was left feeling completely powerless. One day I had a stable position that I had worked hard for, and the next I was just gone. Replaced by someone I had never met, someone with no proven track record, someone who got the job not because of skill, but because of blood. That hurt. But what hurt more was the betrayal, not just of my career, but of my trust in someone I had truly respected. I kept asking myself, should I move on and let it go? Maybe find a new job, start fresh, pretend this was just another life lesson. A lot of people would have done just that. And for a while, I considered it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that staying silent meant agreeing with what had happened. It meant accepting that someone could manipulate the system, misuse their power, and just get away with it, without any consequences. That didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just about me anymore. If Thomas could do this to me, he could do it to others too. I had seen how he ran things behind the scenes. I knew more than most. And suddenly I realized I had something very powerful, the truth. So I started gathering everything I could. I went back through emails, old messages, calendar invites, anything that could show patterns, contradictions, or hidden communication. I remembered conversations I'd overheard over the years, little things that didn't make sense back then but made a lot more sense now. I dug deeper into that photo I found, the one of him with the secret family, and traced it back to an online post from years ago that had since been deleted but not forgotten by the internet. Piece by piece, I was putting together a puzzle. The more I found, the clearer it became that this wasn't a simple case of hiring a relative. Thomas had built a separate life, one he kept completely hidden from everyone at the company. The public image he projected, that of a family man with integrity and transparency, was fake. He had used the company's image and resources to maintain his own cover story. And now he had handed over a leadership role to his hidden son, sweeping me aside like I was nothing. Once I had everything I needed, I knew I couldn't sit on it any longer. I wrote a detailed exposé. It took me days to put it together, not just to make sure I got all the facts right, but because I wanted to tell the story in a way that didn't just scream revenge. This wasn't about me playing the victim. This was about showing how someone in power had abused that power, and how a company that claimed to value honesty and meritocracy was being led by someone who lived the exact opposite. In the exposé, I included it all. I wrote about my journey at the company, what I contributed, what I sacrificed, and how I was blindsided. I revealed what I had discovered about Thomas's secret family, backed with photos, links, and timelines. I explained how the hiring of his son wasn't just unethical, it was part of a larger cover-up. I even included details about conversations where I had heard hints of something being hidden. Conversations I now realized were attempts to dodge the truth. Once it was finished, I posted it online. I shared it anonymously at first, but I didn't stay anonymous for long. People at the company immediately recognized the story. Word spread fast. Within hours, there were emails flying around, questions being asked, and a wave of shock hitting every corner of the office. Former coworkers reached out to me. Some were supportive. Others were in disbelief. But what mattered most was that the truth was finally out there. It wasn't easy putting myself out like that. I knew I was risking my professional reputation. I knew people would question my motives, try to dismiss it all as bitterness or drama. But I also knew that if I didn't speak up, no one else would. The entire system would keep running just as it had, and someone else would be the next to quietly disappear without a trace. Once the exposé went public, I knew things were going to get messy. But even I wasn't prepared for the sheer magnitude of the fallout. The company's response was almost predictable in its attempt to downplay everything. They tried to spin it as just another internal restructuring that was unrelated to any personal matters. But the more people dug into the story, the clearer it became that this wasn't about business. It was about a man using his position to protect a secret life. And that was something no amount of spin could cover up. The company's stock price took a nosedive. It didn't happen overnight, but it started to decline sharply as investors and clients began to ask questions. Thomas tried to brush it off, telling everyone that the scandal wouldn't affect the business, but the damage was already done. The trust had been broken, and you can't just glue that back together with words. The whole thing started to unravel. More and more employees began to voice their concerns, not just about his leadership, but about the toxic work culture he had fostered. People who had been quietly frustrated for years now felt like they had permission to speak up, and they did. It was like a pressure valve had been released. As the storm continued to grow, I felt a mix of emotions. At first, I couldn't shake the guilt. I wondered, was I being too harsh? Did I overstep? It was hard, seeing the ripple effect of what I had done. I'd taken a huge risk by exposing Thomas. Was it worth it? I questioned whether I had done the right thing. After all, I was the one who had lost my job. I was the one who had been pushed out and replaced. Was I just acting out of bitterness? Was I trying to get revenge? But then, as I took a step back and let myself think clearly, I realized it wasn't just about me. It was about more than my personal frustration. It was about doing the right thing. It was about showing that this kind of behavior, this kind of manipulation and dishonesty, wouldn't go unnoticed. People needed to see that if you use your power to lie and hurt others, you will be held accountable. I had been the one to take the hit, but it wasn't going to stop with me. I refused to let him get away with it and keep damaging people's careers while covering up his personal life behind closed doors. That's when the flood of messages started coming in. Former colleagues reached out, people who had worked with me for years, people who had seen, the same cracks in the system that I had. They were supportive. Some of them even said they had suspected something was off with Thomas all along, but didn't feel they could speak out. Many of them thanked me for being the one to step up and expose him. The support I got was overwhelming. It wasn't just sympathy, it was gratitude. It felt like I wasn't alone in this. People were seeing what I had seen, and they were grateful that someone had the courage to put it out there. I wasn't just getting messages from colleagues. Some clients, too, who had been working with the company for years, reached out. They were shocked by what they learned, and many said they had already been wary of Thomas, but had never felt comfortable questioning him. Now they felt like there was validation for their concerns. As the story gained traction in the media, I could see how things were shifting. People were paying attention. People who had been silent for years now had the courage to speak out. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just about what had happened to me. It was about the broader issue of transparency, integrity, and fairness in the workplace. I had started something much bigger than myself, and while that brought a certain sense of pride, it also made me realize just how many others had been affected by the same toxic culture I had been part of. There was also a part of me that couldn't help but feel a little vindicated. Not in the sense that I was glad to see Thomas getting torn down, but in the sense that I had finally given a voice to those who had been silenced for so long, the people who had been pushed aside, ignored, or overshadowed by someone who thought their position was above reproach. In the end, though, the support wasn't just emotional, it was practical too. Some former colleagues offered me job leads or connected me with people who could help me get back on my feet. It was comforting to know that even though I'd lost my position, the relationships I had built over the years hadn't vanished. Those real connections, the ones based on mutual respect and honesty, were still there, and they were stronger than any job title could have been. After everything that had happened, it felt like the walls were finally closing in on Thomas. The pressure from the media, the employees, the clients, it all started to catch up with him. Despite his attempts to downplay the situation and brush everything off, the truth had already been laid bare. People saw through the lies, and his reputation, which he had spent years building, crumbled faster than anyone could have imagined. Eventually, Thomas was forced to step down. He couldn't keep up the facade any longer. The company, in a desperate bid to salvage what little was left of its reputation, tried to distance itself from the whole mess, but the damage was already done. Stock prices had plummeted, employees were leaving, and the clients who had once trusted the brand were now questioning everything. They couldn't unsee what had happened, and they couldn't ignore the truth about the toxic culture that Thomas had allowed to thrive. It was too late to rebuild that trust. As for his son, who had taken my position without so much as a proper introduction, it didn't take long for the company to realize that his appointment was a disaster. He was unqualified, completely out of his depth, and didn't have the leadership skills to carry the role. It wasn't long before he was let go as well. In the end, it was a perfect storm. Thomas's reign was over, and the company had to face the consequences of what had been allowed to unfold under his watch. On a personal level, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. I had risked everything to expose the truth, and now, seeing the fallout play out, it was clear that what I had done was the right thing. Sure, I had lost my job in the process, but I had gained something far more valuable: my self-respect. For the first time in a long time, I felt free from the toxic environment that had held me back for so long. I had stood up for myself, And in doing so, I had not only changed my own life, but also helped open the door for others to stand up for what was right. It wasn't easy. The road ahead was uncertain, and there were moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. Losing a job, especially one you've invested so much in, is never easy. But looking back, I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. I had exposed a system that was corrupt, and in the process, I found my own strength. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.